Hi, everybody. I'm Ross the Boss. In today's interview, we have a very funny comedian compared to like not a funny comedian. But no, this guy's great. I've seen this guy many times. You might know him from Netflix, Showtime. He actually played a coach on Teen Wolf on MTV for many seasons. And he has his own podcast, which I actually find very entertaining, called What's Wrong with Orny Adams. A lot of things are, trust me. Let's welcome Orny Adams to the show. Orny, welcome. Good seeing you,
Hey,
buddy.
buddy, how you doing?
You're
Good to see you too. I like you. I like when I'm the backdrop. I appreciate that.
You look good. You're again very funny stand-up. I actually first saw you on a documentary called Comedian with Seinfeld, and it's almost 20 years since that came out. I mean, it's unbelievable. Tell us a little about that documentary. It kind of broke your career. I mean, I know you were. You were the talk of comedy for like a long time. I mean, just tell us about it. You still are.
What happened?
I
Not
don't know.
anymore.
I'm just kidding. But
Yeah?
what I'm saying is
Yeah.
this. I mean, that really broke you. You shared the screen with Jerry Seinfeld, who's a true icon. Just tell us about the documentary and why people should still watch it.
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure people should still watch it. And to be honest, I kind of like not being the talk of comedy. I think that flying under the radar nowadays is safer and more comfortable for me. But that was something that Seinfeld put together. He produced this documentary. He's got a passion for stand-up, which I certainly respect. He's a craftsman, and I think we sort of came together on that. I think we sort of had a lot of similarities. And he was in New York City. His show had just ended, the Seinfeld show.
Never heard of it.
He was going back to stand-up comedy. Yeah. And he went back to. Here's the funny thing. Now that I think about it, because either you love me in that documentary or you can't stand me, which is fine. I think that's a beautiful place to be. But I'm still the villain in this documentary, which includes Bill Cosby.
You're right.
And you think he would have replaced me at this point for the guy we go after in Comedian. But Seinfeld was putting together an hour. He wanted to videotape it, which I think is great. This is before podcasts. This is before people really had access to what goes on and what it takes to be a stand-up comic. So people were fascinated by it. And Seinfeld was out in the clubs, and this is New York City. This is pre 9/11. And I was one of a handful of comedians that was working every club every night. And I would bounce around from venue to venue. And it was probably the greatest point in my career.
I think it broke you. I mean, I got to know you as a comedian, and I was working at the Tonight Show back then, and it really opened my eyes. I mean, I showed you how hard it is to write a set, to write material, to work material. I mean, it showed you how it's done, and you did it a great way.
Yeah,
and you did the right way. Actually, it's weird about that documentary. You never really saw Seinfeld working that hard on his material while you were busting your ass every night.
He certainly does, I'm sure. I mean, you can't write at that level without really being a technician. But, I was home recently and I was going through some of my boxes and I found some of my folders that binders it took to put together a Tonight Show set. And we're talking like a 5-inch or a 3-inch, I don't even know, like binder, like this big. And it was filled with hundreds of pages of notes for one Tonight Show set. So to put together a 5-minute set would take hundreds of pages of notes and revisions and tweaking one word. Should I say the guy shot his attorney or should I say he shot his lawyer? Like, it really is technical.
It really is. And I feel comedy has shifted a lot. And I'm going to talk to you about it because I think I can have a great conversation about this topic. Is how comics have to watch what they say now. Even Chris Rock even said, I can't really do much of my act anymore because what's going on and people getting canceled. I mean, recently, Louis C.K. just announced he's doing a tour again. Thank God. I mean, he's one of the best. I would put him and you on the same wavelength when it comes to writing and getting new material out. And there's not many comics can do it like yourself. I'm not complimenting you because you're here. I could care less. But what I'm saying is this, Orny. I mean, tell the audience like what's going on in comedy now and how you, especially you, Orny Adams, has to watch what he says.
Well, I mean, if you know my brand of comedy, it's never been sort of like The Edge. in that sense. Like I never pushed it, and because I felt like other people were doing it much better, and I felt like it was more true to who they were. Like I'm sort of attacking like Ziploc bags, like in a really sort of subversive way. So when you see me, really the angle is to point out how we're more similar than dissimilar. So I'm sort of in a safer place, but I do notice nowadays I tend to push it more because I feel like it's my duty to push it more. So I go after absurd things like buddy benches in school, where they're these safe places for little kids to sit, you know, and if they feel like they have no friends on the playground, they go sit on a bench. And it's the most absurd thing I've ever. And then another kid's supposed to go, oh look, there's a loser sitting on the bench. You know, and I go through this whole story and how you don't sit on the buddy bench, how you tough it out like I did in the playground, and you take your beatings. And so I feel like now I'm pushing just a little bit more in a sort of sneaky way. But yeah, I mean, comedy is really, it's unfortunate because I do feel like, you know, you don't have to be crass, but I feel like comics really break down a lot of things that should be broken down, and it should create a discussion. And I think the reaction is like this, and nobody's really thinking like, what, you know, when Orny's talking about the buddy bench, what is he really saying? What does he really want me to think? Instead, they go straight to cancel without really getting all the facts. I think it is dangerous in a sense, and it's upsetting that somebody like a Chris Rock, who, I mean, he's such a great comic that one little piece of that in his brain just screws with the whole, you know, DNA of being a comic.
It's really sad. I mean, it really does screw up the whole ecosystem of comedy. I mean, I've been around comedy a long time, and you have too. And even like comics like Seinfeld can't do material like they used to, just because there's a thing called a cell phone, and people videotaping you on stage, even though you don't want them to. I'm sure they say put your cell phones away, but people don't listen. They don't care. They could care less what they say before a show. And I just feel
they barely care what you're saying during a show.
No kidding. So. But I mean, the whole thing is, I mean, I feel it's just a sad state of comedy. I hope it goes away soon, the whole cancel culture. I feel that I always was brought up that a comic can go on stage and do anything he wants except yell fire. But those days are over. You gotta just walk like you're walking on eggshells. And I know it's tough for you because you've been always like, I don't want to say you're like an edgy comic, but you always did material that made people think, and if they think the wrong way, then Orny Adams gets in trouble. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, like, and I apologize, it took a lot to really get me on this podcast, and I thank you and your team for really reaching out and sort of giving me many chances to respond. And part of the reason I don't do podcasts is because I could say one small thing by accident. I could have one lapse, like all of a sudden, you go, what does that sound? And then I come back and you're saying something, and I go, oh, yeah. And now I'm agreeing with something I didn't really listen to. And now it's on this podcast, and somebody's going to take that clip, and then they're going to put it out there, and they're going to ruin me. So it's a liability to do stuff like this. And we have to take all this stuff into consideration, because right now, you know, I've got a really good, steady career. And yeah, you know, when you watch me in that documentary, I'm talking about how I want to be the next biggest, greatest thing.
You should. That's why you're doing this, not to just be mediocre. You want to be the best. And yes. And comics got jealous, of course. Oh, you can't book Orny Adams. Yeah, I'm booking Orny Adams because he's funny. So Orny, you have a podcast. What's wrong with Orny Adams? The funny part of this is this. I contacted you to come on our show, like you mentioned, and you say, Ross, I don't do sports stuff. I go to your podcast, you're doing the whole episode on Larry Bird. And it's number 33 episode, and Larry Bird was 33. And you did a whole episode of 30 about Larry Bird, and you know sports. So let's stop pretending like you're like this guy that doesn't watch sports, like somebody, you know, like Jay Leno does not watch sports. During the Super Bowl, he'll ride his car up and down the 405 freeway, not even watching a second of the Super Bowl. But you are a sports fan. You're from Livingston, right? Massachusetts.
No, Lexington, Massachusetts.
Lexington.
But it's really kind of interesting why I'm into sports, because I wasn't raised in a sports family. My dad didn't really watch sports. I like the human nature, the human interest behind sports, like the motivation and what it takes to really be the best. And, because these guys are geniuses. You take like a Kobe or a Bird or a Jordan, they're geniuses. You look what Tom Brady puts into what he does. And yes, I'm naming a lot of Boston sports
it's
figures.
okay.
But
It's okay.
yeah,
They're all genius. You're right. They're all the goats. Keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. So when I started doing comedy in Boston, you understand a large part of being a stand-up comic is what happens before the show in the green room and what happens afterwards. And we would all sit around and have drinks after a show. And I noticed, most of those comics all talk sports, and I knew nothing about sports. So in order to fit in, I started watching the Boston sports team so I could be part of that conversation. And I found that I loved it. And but what really turned me into loving sports was Real Sports with Brian Gumbel, where he really got behind the stories.
Great show.
So, the motivation for me really getting into sports was stand-up comedy.
And you had an opus. And tell us about your podcast. Tell us why we should listen. It's actually quite brilliant. I don't use that word that often. You do a great job with that show. You do observational stuff that people never think about. Why don't you give us some examples of some of the topics you talked about?
Well, yesterday I and the one I just released, 34. What I do is it's sort of a companion piece for my stand-up comedy. So if you see my stand-up comedy, it's like this. I don't stop for if I'm on there an hour or 10 minutes or 5 minutes. It's like I go for it every time. And it should be laugh, laugh, laugh. With my podcast, I do it alone, and I do it alone because that's what I am in this world. I'm alone. I've always been alone. It's why I went into stand-up comedy. I never had a great group of friends. You look at like comedy now, it's very sort of like cliquey. It's these guys are all friends and they're doing podcasts and, look at this. And I was never included in that group, and I'm fine with that. So it's just me and the microphone. And yesterday I've reached a point now where I was at a Chinese restaurant with friends and everything was going great. And then the fortune cookie came. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't read. The print was too small. And I know that hasn't changed this lifetime. I've changed. So my eyes now suck. And it got worse because somebody was like, pulled out reading glasses. I'm like, oh my God. I have friends that have brought glasses to the restaurant to read the fortune. To read the book. I already don't go to restaurants where the font on the menu is too small. Like, thank God we're on our phones now and I can go like this and look at the menu. And so, I discuss stuff like that, stuff that I think is just relatable to everybody. And I'm really into documentaries and research, and I read books. I just reviewed a book called The Sociopath Next Door, because 4% of the population is sociopathic. And I've always been sort of weary of charming people. I've never trusted charming people. You're not charming, so I trust you.
I could be charming if I need to, trust me. But I agree with you. When they're over the top charming, you got a big red flag comes out. You're 100% right.
Absolutely. And then yesterday I was discussing cults, which I'm obsessed with cults and how these people, like, how can I not get a bigger comedy? Like, I can't get people. I'm pretty good at comedy, and I'm having trouble getting people to really follow my comedy or getting people to follow my podcast in mass numbers. But these cult leaders, and I study them, and I'm thinking, like, I should start a cult, like, because I see these guys, they're not even good looking, and they have all these women around, and they have Rolls Royces. Somehow they've convinced. So I thought I should study their moves to be a cult. And I'm talking about this just organically on the podcast yesterday. And then I thought maybe I'm too good looking to be a cult leader.
You're too good looking to be a cult leader. You gotta have flaws to be a cult leader. You don't have that. I'm sorry.
I'd be the hottest cult leader of all time. Like, there's no Jim Jones. He's not even Bikram Yoga. He doesn't stand a chance next to me.
The guy from Waco. What's the guy from Waco's name? That
David Koresh.
Yeah, David Koresh. Exactly.
Even Silver Lake wouldn't accept those glasses.
Even Charles Manson, like the original cult leader, he was the scroungy little guy that couldn't even get a song made, basically.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
100% right. 100%.
Yeah.
So things are opening up again for comedy. I know you've been anxious, biting on your nails, wanting to get out there, perform again. Tell me about your stand-up schedule and where we can see you live.
You know, the truth is, this is the truth. During COVID,
Yeah.
I really loved that break. I really,
Did?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what did you do during COVID? Do you write material? Did you just sit there and work out? Did you watch TV? Did you read your books? Did you start a
Yeah.
cult? What did you do?
I was doing a lot of gardening, and I was doing
Okay.
some writing, and
Okay.
I developed a podcast, and I bought all the equipment. I taught myself how to audio edit,
Oh, wow.
how to run these cameras, because I bought all these 4K, these broadcast quality cameras, and I turned a 1961 Shasta trailer into a podcast studio. So I had to learn
Oh, that's
lighting and
great.
everything. Yeah, and I kept busy, but I'll tell you what I didn't miss was, like, I'm in Nashville next week at Zany's, and I didn't miss begging people to come see my show. I didn't miss making these videos like, hey, I'll be in Nashville, like checking numbers. I didn't miss the competitiveness. I didn't miss what spots am I getting this week at the LA Improv? What spots am I getting at the Factory? Where am I? How come the store doesn't use me? Like, I didn't miss any of that shit.
Yeah.
And it really sort of gave me a breather. And I actually worked on another project. Secretly, I was working on politics and writing for that. And I was using my brain in a way that I'd never used before, and I really liked it. And I said to myself, if I go back and do stand-up comedy, I remember the first show I did was at an outdoor venue called the Whitley. And
Was that in Atlanta? Where was that at?
no, here.
In
Here.
LA. Okay.
Yeah, in LA. And I said to myself, okay, listen, if you get up on stage and you suck, walk away. Just walk. It's done. You did it. You did some Tonight shows. You did Letterman. You've had Showtime specials and comedy. You've done it. Netflix special. You did it. Allow yourself that. And I got up there, and I was so surprised at how well it went. And I really, and I don't know if this should be coming from me, but I thought, I think I'm actually more relevant than I've ever been. And
You know why? Because you sit and write material. A lot of these comics, they don't write material. They go out there with attitudes and pretend, they have no point of views. Those things are over. You're one of the few breeds that actually have a point of view, Orny. And I'm happy there's comics like you working right now that have a point of view, because I watch comics now. There's no jokes. It's just attitude. Or
I don't
20 times.
I don't get it, because it's, the stage to me is so sacred, and it's such an honor to be up there that, like, I just look forward to it all day. Like, you've got to hold me back like the bull, ready for the bull, ready to be let out of the pen. Like, I can't wait. That's why I get up there, and I'm so like even right now I'm amped up, because I can't control myself. The excitement.
Well, Orny, thanks for coming on. If you please go to his podcast, What's Wrong with Orny Adams? It's so entertaining. His thoughts are so crazy and so like dark. It's fun to listen to. Orny, always great seeing you. If you could see him live in Nashville next week, go see him anywhere. It's one of the best comics working. Orny, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. And let's grab lunch sometime.
That'd be great. I'm in Tarzana. I'd love to see you, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thank you.